As soon as I started to run away, I got that behind you feeling, only much stronger than it ever was before. It was as if something was angry at me, and it wanted to find me and kill me, or worse. As I got closer to the door, the temperature began to drop a lot. A few minutes in, and the walls were starting to ice over. What's more, the faster I went, the louder the music became. Even the walls were getting moist, as if the place wanted to eat me alive. After about 8 minutes of running, my hands were shaking. I was completely exhausted and dying from the cold. I was getting closer to the end now, and what's more, I could finally see something. The exit. The green light that I was seeing was actually a fire escape sign. I thought I was about to make it. I could not believe it. I was getting out. However, I knew this was no time for delays, so I kept running full speed. Just as I thought I was about to collapse from my exhaustion, I made it to the top. My hands were badly shaking from the exertion or the cold, I didn't know. I could barely clasp my fingers around the door handle, and with a huge push, I forced the door open. It was a heavy metal door, and I needed to put all my weight on it. As it creaked open, I stepped outside and took one last look back at my former prison. Apparently, I had come out of a maintenance closet, but I didn't have time to think about it now. The previously calm air was now cutting into me. It hurt a lot. After the shock of the escape wore off, I tried to find out where I was, and it definitely was not the school. There was snow on the ground, and I even saw a real sky. As I was going towards an elevator for some shelter from the cold, I looked up and saw a large sign. I was in Slaxville? Sunday. Oh wow, things have been wild. Let me start from the beginning. After I left that hell and the realization that I was in Slaxville set in, I quickly realized that I was freezing out here. After a few minutes, I found a protected bus shelter and for the first time in days, sat down. After a while, a woman in a large coat approached me. I guess seeing a kid out in the cold with no parents in sight was a bad look. She ended up offering me a jacket and then took me in her car to the police station. When I got in her car, she introduced herself. "Call me Miss Patterson. You okay, kid?" She explained that she was going on one of her late night drives and happened upon me, freezing my butt off in the cold. She also told me that we were going to the police station and that they could take care of me there. As we drove, I looked out the window on the town. The town seemed different than I remembered it. I had gone there not so long ago during a sports tournament, but some things were different. For one thing, lots of previously torn down houses were fully built. Maybe I was misremembering things from my previous trips. When we arrived at the police station, Miss Patterson explained the situation to the officer on duty. After a few minutes of talking, she beckoned me inside the station, and I sat down in the waiting room. After a few minutes of waiting, an officer came out of a side room and asked me to come with him. The officer explained that I had been found alone by a bus stop and that he needed to know who my parents were. I told him who they were, Susan Heffley and Frank Heffley. After checking his database, he showed me a list of people and asked me if I recognized any of them. I said no. After a few more questions, he asked what my hometown was. I guess in order to narrow down the search, I answered simply Plainview. He gave me an odd look and said that there were no nearby towns with that name. Now I was getting confused. I told him that it was right next to us, just a few miles away. Again, the officer said that it's not there. I asked him to pull up Google Maps and that I would show him. He obliged and I scrolled to where it was. Apparently, even the GPS was having a hard time locating Plainview. I asked him to search for it again with no results. Was my hometown missing, along with everyone there? I tried searching for nearby towns, and those worked fine. I even looked for news stories that I knew had happened in Plainview, but they were all gone. Like they never existed at all. Was I having a psychotic break? Was I really going insane? I asked the officer what day it was in hopes of grounding myself. He looked slightly concerned and replied, December 2nd, 2026. Now things were really ramping up. I asked to collect my phone and to look at something. He agreed and I opened up the calendar app. To my amazement, the date still read November 28th, 2023. I showed him my own date and he asked why it was 2 years behind. I said that this was the correct date and that I hadn't changed it. Then I decided to look around the small room we were in. The more I looked, the more unfamiliar things I spotted. I asked the officer what phone he had and he replied, the iPhone 17 Plus. With this, combined with everything else, I knew that I was wrong. Was I really going crazy? Was I really in that place for years without knowing it? Finally, as one last-ditch effort, I asked him to search for Roderick Heffley. After about a minute of looking, I found who I was looking for.